Well, a special good morning to you, LaDawn. Good morning, Bahamas. It's a great Tuesday morning to get your morning started right here on the ZNS Morning Edition. This morning we are reporting your initial traffic report near the intersection of Wolf Road and Blue Hill Road. And already many persons are on the strip making their way to work and around the island. This morning we're also joined by Sergeant Cressinia Johnson from the Royal Bahamas Police Force Traffic Division, giving you your initial look at traffic. Good morning, Officer Johnson.
A pleasant good morning to you and a pleasant good morning, Bahamas.
So talk to us about overnight traffic. What were incidents looking like?
Okay, coming out of the night period, we've had 22 accidents just involving damages. We've had 10 accidents involving minor injury, and we've had one hit-and-run accident coming from Grand Bahama. We still have 12 persons in hospital as victims of traffic accidents.
So some good news there with those hit and runs. Of course, as you know, here in the Morning Edition, we've been talking a lot about the hit and runs. And one of the focuses that we have this morning, later on in the newscast, is on right behind me, these pedestrian crossing. Now, I spoke with several pedestrian crossing guards yesterday, but from the police perspective, what advice can you give drivers as they're approaching these areas, many of which are placed near schools?
But let me start by saying this. In addition to the new amendments, there came into effect the regulated version of the persons who go into the streets. They are called patrol officers. They regulate the pedestrian crossings, okay? So we're going to get more into that as we go. But as it pertains to drivers, in your view, as you drive forward, we have that broad view. Your windshield should be clear, and it provides a view where you can see all sides of the street. You should be able to see the sidewalk as well as the street. Nothing should obstruct your view. So as when you're coming to areas that has high activity for pedestrian traffic, you should see some signage that advises you that, hey, I'm entering into a high pedestrian traffic area. If that is the case, you're going to see street markings. You should see street markings and signs. In that case, you now should be aware and you should be paying attention as you go into these areas to pedestrians. And we have something called a careless pedestrian, and we're going to get into that, where they ask me constantly, hey, is there a fine for jaywalkers? Jaywalkers are called careless pedestrians. Whenever you're walking and if you're in an area of a pedestrian crossing, pedestrians, please utilize the pedestrian crossing. It's going to help the drivers to be able to see you, and it's going to help you to get to where you need to go safely.
Now, one of those key points that we talked about this morning as well, while we know the pedestrian is clearly labeled, there's about 120 feet distance away from that spot that is still considered that pedestrian zone.
Yes, because while you're in that pedestrian zone, it's about 120 feet. You still want drivers to, even though you do have the careless pedestrian, you still want them to be able to travel at a speed where they even provide for someone who's making their way to that pedestrian crossing. So yes, if in these areas you're going to have it's before that crossing and after that crossing. A lot of people are not aware of that. But those zigzag marks in the street, they're actually depicting that area, depicting that 120 feet for you to travel and be pay attention basically to what is going on in that area within that zone.
And one of those points you talked about earlier as well, signage. Now, of course, we're in the Bahamas. We have accidents often, and so many times street signs may be absent or missing or knocked down. But again, once drivers are in city limits, particularly, they should be aware that schools, churches, banks, other things are in those areas.
Yes.
And there's a specific zone or driving speed.
Yes. So, for example, we spoke about the 15 mile per hour speed limit in school zones. Okay, but we know that if we're getting to an area that has, like, for example, right behind us, we have a gas station, we have a church, we have a school, and we know that the University of the Bahamas is right down the road. This Blue Hill Road area, this is a hub for persons, especially for pedestrian traffic. We know people are always walking the streets. You've just seen runners. We have seen all types of pedestrian traffic in the area. So knowing your area, and when you get into areas like these, adjusting your speed for the road conditions. This is very important, and drivers, we need you to be able to just focus in on the street. That's why distracted driving, why we're so down on that. We're discouraging that to the utmost. We do not want distracted driving, especially in these areas.
Now, before we wrap up, one last thing I'd like to ask you about. Here in the Bahamas, there seems to be a proliferation of vagabonds. And, we don't talk about it a lot, but, unfortunately, these persons do exist here in our community. Sometimes they're on the road. What do drivers do when they actually come upon someone who doesn't want to move, who's really in their view?
Well, many times I know people have experience, and especially when we talked about earlier with that blind spot. But when you're driving and you have that view, yes, you have that view, but that's also called something called a blind spot. If someone comes on your vehicle when you're traveling and it's like right there as you're traveling, sometimes you can't even see those individuals. So usually we have persons who will shout at them and tell them, hey, come on the street. I've seen one or two who've assisted them out of the street by even giving them a little something to say, hey, let's get on the side of the street. So in those instances, yes, they do exist. We have to deal with it. So if that is the case, if that is your situation, I advise you to be your brother's keeper. Help them out. It may inconvenience you a little bit, but help them out as much as possible to get off the street.
And some great information there. Of course, safety is always key when you're driving on the streets. LaDawn, I hope you're having a great Tuesday. And we are a little chilly out here, but again, it's a great morning. And of course, reporting back to you in studio.